vlog?
Mine.
No. Perfect. Favorite podcast?
Yours. You say whatever comes to mind.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Spin Sucks Fireside Chat. I am Gini Dietrich. I'm very excited to introduce you to Heidi Sullivan, someone I've known for many years, and I tried to count it up and then I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this to myself. So it's been like 3 months that we've known each other. Actually, because we both live in Chicago and we're both in communications. Heidi, for many years, was a female on the leadership team at Cision, and it's actually been super fun to watch her grow personally and professionally. Did not tell her that I was going to say this part, but I remember when Cision bought Vocus, and there was this whole like, do you remember this?
Of course.
Like, there are competitors, but we're buying them. It was very fun to watch from an outside perspective. And by the time she left Cision, she was running Cision Canada as well as digital and social media for the entire organization. So, no small slouch or anything, doesn't know what she's doing or not very smart. One of the things that we've actually talked about at great lengths back in the day and fast forward today is the support that she received from Cision in terms of equality and the way that men and women can work together. So she's always been, for me, a grounding beacon in that conversation. Heidi was at Cision for nearly 15 years, so she remembers the Big Green Bacon's books that I often refer to. So like I said, it's been a while. And today she's added mom, podcast host, and business owner to her resume, and I am thrilled to have her join us to talk women in leadership, PR tools, and the future of our industry. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm so excited to be here today. And yes, I remember the first time that I set foot at Vocus headquarters and realized that everyone there did not have devil horns.
Well, I think we had actually had a conversation about them as competitors, and literally like 2 months later, the announcement comes out, and I'm like, wait a second!
What just happened?
Wait. So yeah, they don't have devil horns, does it?
No.
Yeah, that's too bad. All right, so it's been quite a couple of weeks with the Harvey Weinstein news, and then the Me Too campaign, and now news about Robert Scoble sexually harassing women. So you and I have had many conversations about women in leadership, and PR is dominated by women, but we're still not equal, and we're still not at the leadership level that we should be. So what do you think how does this bode for women in PR?
It's really challenging because I think there's kind of two issues to discuss here. One is on the sexual harassment side and a lot of the news that's coming out,
Sure.
But then also just about equality for women. So
Sure.
I guess first on the sexual harassment side, I am both disheartened and heartened to see all of the news that's coming out right now. I think as women in leadership, I'm sad to say that I'm not terribly surprised to hear how widespread this is. And that's the hardest thing. If women are starting to gain a voice and starting to be able to speak out, and this conversation is starting, that's a very positive thing. To begin to view how widespread it is devastating.
Right.
In thinking about having this chat with you and talks we've had before, decided that I'd share a story from pretty early on in my career. It was one of my first times as a manager, and a female coworker who was about to get fired, rightly so, came to me with a sexual harassment claim, not knowing who to go to. I was her peer, not her supervisor. It was not anyone in my department. And I went to my mentor at the time and said, I got to do something about this. This guy said to me, Heidi, do you really want one of the first things you do in this new management role to be as a whistleblower on, and I will tell you, I was in my 20s and I listened and I didn't say anything. And I've regretted that for over a decade. I mean, 3 months because we haven't known each other.
Right, 3 months. It's only been 3 months.
But I've regretted that for a long time. But I've heard people say now, as some of this is coming out, like, why hasn't anyone said anything? If this was so widespread with Harvey Weinstein, why didn't anyone say anything?
Right.
And I'm like a strong, sassy woman who is really not afraid to say what I think about anything. And I was afraid to say something. I mean, if you go to my Facebook page, you'll find my Me Too post. We have all experienced this, and it is extremely widespread. Now, in saying that, on the positive note, I have been so fortunate, and we've talked about this in my career at Cision. A huge reason, if you asked me if I was going to stay over a dozen years at one company, I would have said absolutely not.
Right.
A huge reason that I stayed is that I grew my career because I was respected as an executive, and not as a man or a woman, but because of what I knew and what I could offer and how hard I worked. And I mean, I've had tons of wonderful female mentors, male mentors. In particular, I want to call out Cision's former CEO, Peter Granite. He always focused on women in leadership, always, was very aware, particularly in our industry. I mean, PR is an industry, the majority of us are women.
Yep.
However, leadership still tends to be heavily male. And for Peter to have the foresight to say, hey, this is an industry dominated by women, and I need women's opinions at the forefront of everything I'm doing, really, really helped foster my career and helped me feel confident. And I think confidence is such a challenge for so many women leaders. So I guess that's kind of on the sexual harassment side. Getting into like women's rights, I mean, we still are a country that doesn't have equal pay for women, which is kind of shocking. And I have been one of those people who has been in fortunate circumstances working for myself, working for men, and working for women, where I've really had people who have supported me. So I do think the more that women can speak out, but the more that men can speak out. When you look at Harvey Weinstein and the number of people that kind of covered things up, it wasn't just women who didn't say something, it was men who covered things up.
Yep.
And there are so many wonderful men out there as well who are all either sons or husbands or fathers and have women in their lives and need to also focus on what they can do to help women have a voice.
So I want to say it was about a year ago, and I can't remember. There was something big that had happened where the conversation was around, women in leadership positions, especially in PR. And you wrote a blog post for Cision that said, I'm an executive at Cision, one of the largest vendors for the PR industry, and here's my experience. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, because that's the gold standard for what it should be, but we're not there yet.
Absolutely not. And I think we see that every day. And I think as companies change, as leadership changes, I say this all the time, that I'm actually so hopeful for my son because of the millennial generation. I think millennials get knocked so much, and having a younger brother and sister-in-law who are millennials and seeing just their different viewpoint on female equality and race and religion, and I feel
human beings and decency. Yeah,
I feel hopeful, but we are not there yet.
No, we're not there yet, and that's sad. I mean, think about the election's a great example of that. Our grandmothers fought for us to have the right to vote, and how many women did not vote?
Yep, absolutely.
And now we're where we are because of it.
Yep.
All right, so let's shift. Let's not get into the political conversation.
We could do that for a while.
We could do that. And let's shift gears a little bit and talk about PR tools. So we've talked a lot about Cision, and Cision for sure is one of the top, if not the top, from a revenue producing standpoint, vendor in the PR industry. But in terms of just tools, you know, and I talk about the PR stack, the communication stack. So what you have to have software wise to be able to not just show attribution, but nurturing and conversion of leads. So what are some of your favorite tools?
I will give my Cision shout out first. Like I worked on the product team there, and you talk about those big green books. My bread and butter was the media research team and building that media database. And I still don't think there's another one out there like it.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah. So I still absolutely love Cision. And when you talk about the PR stack and combining all of the pieces from distribution, social, database, monitoring, insights, all of it layered onto it, Cision has all the pieces. And they still have a lot of great people there. And they've combined a lot of the best in breed, whether it's Gorkana or Vocus or PRN. I mean, they've really taken a lot of, you know, great tools and brought them together. I would love to give a shout out to Air PR as well.
Yes, love Air PR.
I think what those guys are doing with PR attribution, with really figuring out the business indicators, and instead of just looking at impressions and AVs and hits, really looking at the business impact that PR has, and looking at owned media side by side with earned media, because so much of that is a PR piece. So I love Air PR. Also, this is a startup from a good friend of mine, Brandon Anderson. I love Seralytics, Seralytics, who are really figuring out the topics that resonate with your community, what's working that you're writing about, and what's working that your competitors are writing about. I think so much of it is throwing spaghetti at the wall, and this takes a lot of the guesswork out of that and says, this is what you should be writing about. This is what's actually getting you conversions or engagements.
Right.
Instead of just like, I made a listicle and it got a lot of views. And then, of course, I used to host the Influence Pros podcast. I am an influencer marketing wonk, looking at both the paid and earned side. Earned, I think there are traditional tools like Tracker. I think Cision is doing some cool things. But on the paid side, the new guys that I really love are called Vazoola, Vazoola. And they really have built like a pretty cool network of over 100,000 influencers that are doing some cool things. So if you're looking to tack in a little paid to that. And then lastly, you know, what TrendKite's doing is always pretty cool. They always seem to be adding a cool new feature. So, I mean, there's a ton of tools out there and looking at the right needs. Either you kind of piecemeal it all together, or you choose a one-stop shop. But it's fun to watch what's going on right now.
It is fun to watch, and I feel like we're finally able to have the data that we need to be able to prove that we're an investment instead of an expense. Now, the rest of the industry needs to come along, but we definitely have the software there to prove it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so artificial intelligence. I really think artificial intelligence is going to completely change the way that we do our jobs. And, you know, in the last 10 years, it certainly has been turned on its head. And I think it's heading toward even faster turmoil, for lack of a better term, because of artificial intelligence. So what's your thought on that?
Well, we absolutely need it solely because of the sheer amount of content that we have to deal with.
Right.
Not only is it huge content volumes, what's the stat that there's more content that's been produced in the past 2 years than the entire history of the human race?
Right.
But the way that we all digest news and content, it has totally been flipped on its head.
Yep.
We don't say, honey, turn off the TV. It's time to stop, or stop doing the dishes. It's time to watch the 9 o'clock news.
Right.
Or, you know, find the news in the newspaper, even if we're still reading it. It's aggregated in real time and delivered to us in myriad ways through a social post or an email newsletter or you know, a friend forwarding something, and it's competing amongst all of our personal content as well. So we're just like, you know, it's just coming at us and the news is finding us. figuring out how to get to your target audience as a PR person, there's no more silver bullet. There's no more, well, if I'm just featured in the New York Times, boom, I've reached everyone.
Yeah.
And the New York Times is still important.
Right. Yes. But not the only thing.
But it's not the only thing. So figuring out how to get the New York Times article into your audience's hand is a huge challenge. So AI, I think, becomes a huge piece of that. We're able to identify these micro audiences, these niche audiences. We can start customizing and targeting our messages to the person that's reading it like marketers do, instead of just the same message for everyone.
I just saw this and I can't remember the exact number. So I'm going to fudge it and then put the exact number in the blog post. But Campbell's Soup just figured out a way. Did you see this?
I haven't seen it.
They figured out a way to personalize messages to something like 12,000 people.
Unbelievable. And see, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
One video that they've produced, and then they figured out a way to do that to 12,000 people. So you're right. The micro-targeting is at a level where just human beings cannot do it. It has to be automated. It has to be done by robots.
And as we start to look at the amount of data and trying to figure out the real insights, as we start to actually drive those back to business indicators, whether it's revenue or conversions or whatever your goal happens to be, or share of voice, it's not something, I shamefully, again, this was 3 months ago in my first internship in PR.
When we both were interning 3 months ago.
My first job was like literally with a ruler and a bunch of like newspaper clips and like measuring them.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously, you can't do that anymore. There's just too much content, and really figure out how to hit our audiences. AI is going to be such a huge part of our everyday jobs.
What AirPR is doing with PR attribution, and I love that because, everybody and their brothers wants Fast Company and Forbes and the New York Times and TechCrunch and, whatever happens to be. But now you have attribution where you can say, well, actually, you need all those things for brand awareness. Sure. Yeah. But our trade publication that has 12,000 subscribers is driving far more leads that actually convert to customers than the New York Times. So now you can go back and say, here's the data and here's the story it's telling.
Or maybe you're getting a bunch of those great hits and then you find out that actually 3 of your own blog posts are what's driving the most actual conversions or engagements.
Right. One of the things that we do is, because on Spin Sucks, we're doing a lot of product stuff, where I'm studying the internet marketers, and the internet marketers all say email, email, email. Email for us is not our biggest conversion. It's the blog, hands down. And people fight me on it. And I'm like, well,
the numbers are here. The coolest thing though, is that 10 years ago in PR, if we were saying that, we would say like, we think this is what's converting. Now we can say numbers don't lie.
Yep. Now we know. Exactly. All right, so let's talk trends for the next year and 3 years. I would say 10, but we could all be out of jobs in the next 10 years. So what do you think is going to happen in the next year to 3 years?
Well, so I think 1 year, probably the biggest thing that we're going to see is more adoption of these kind of metrics that we're talking about.
Good.
The tools are all getting there, right? AirPR is there. Trendkite just launched PR attribution. Cision is doing a lot with attribution. And as the tools start to mature, you're going to start seeing PR people able to sit at the table with marketing and say, all of our Marcom activities combined, you have the social team and the marketing team and the communications team. Here's how we're actually impacting the overall business together. And that's huge. We've never had that before. And I think anytime that I talk to PR people, they all say the same thing, like, okay, I know impressions are not the way to go, or I know number of hits,
no idea,
but I don't know what else to do here. I don't have another 3 employees to hire to sift through the data. Well, the tools are catching up. So I think in the next year, I think we're going to see it.
Good.
In 3 years, to swing right back around to politics, social media for like over a decade was kind of this wild west of everyone has a voice who resonates. And then now all the talk is fake news. And as we look at the generation after millennials, and how they're really digesting news. People are really looking for the source of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to see a rebirth of journalism. I know that's kind of like a radical one, especially as someone who was working for the media database and watching journalists get laid off by the hundreds in 2008.
Right.
But
you were still in high school then. So.
Yeah, right. I mean, like I was sitting there
right
at my prom measuring that.
Homecoming dance. Look at this.
Whether it's going to come in an iteration that's exactly what we see today, I don't know. But I do have the feeling we're going to see a rebirth of like specific voices and sites that have journalistic integrity in declaring that they fact check and
right.
And I think that the pendulum is going to swing back, and I know that no one else is predicting that, but I think that's what we're going to see.
I think on Reagan over the weekend there was an article that talked about millennials are starting to pick up newspapers and magazines again, not in the actual form, but on Flipboard or through their Apple News or whatever happens to be, and that's what they're going towards. So maybe, and you know what, we've also seen a transition back to actual books.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You might be right. You might be right.
So we'll see. And then, like in 10 years, could we please get the flying cars that I was promised in Back to the Future?
right.
Like the Cubs won.
The Cubs
I want my flying cars.
I want my flying car. I am down with that. All right, now it's time for the speed round. The goal for you is to answer with the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, I'm on it.
You ready? Favorite blog?
Spin Sucks.
Oh, stop it.
Honestly, Reality Blurred by Andy Denhart. I'm such like a reality TV wonk, and he's just snarky and awesome.
Love it. All right. Favorite podcast?
Influence Pros. No. I am a marketer. No, this is such a cheesy one, but I faithfully listen to This American Life.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What book changed your life?
Ooh, I don't know about that one. I do a lot of reading, but what book changed my life? I don't know if I have a good answer for that one. I am. All
right. What have you read this year that's been your favorite?
I read Caleb Carr's The Alienist, and they're coming out with a show coming up soon.
Nice.
Like First Serial Killer, and like I read for work, and then everything else I read is like super cheesy, like one rogue agent saves the universe. A lawyer's wife was kidnapped. I need to relax a little bit here.
I love it. At least it's not Fabio romance novel.
No.
You're like, it's not.
I swear.
Favorite cocktail?
Gin and tonic.
Nice. Red vines or
Hendrix.
Well, yeah. Red vines or Twizzlers?
Twizzlers.
Mm-hmm.
They're in my
red vines.
They're in my fridge right now. Do you refrigerate your Twizzlers?
I do not refrigerate my Twizzlers. I've never done that, but now I might try it.
Telling you.
All right. Okay. Chicago or New York style pizza?
Oh, that's a no-brainer for me. It's absolutely Chicago.
Really?
Although I'm gonna go Chicago thin crust, not deep dish.
Yeah, I like Chicago thin crust. I don't like Chicago deep
dish. I need my pizza in squares.
You and my 4-year-old.
Which is basically my taste in pizza.
Right. Comiskey or U.S. Cellular?
Oh, U.S. Cellular. I'm a South Sider.
Do you call it U.S. Cellular or do you call it Comiskey? I've never been able to get past Comiskey, ever.
No, it's definitely Comiskey, but no one seems to know what I'm talking about anymore.
We just keep showing our age, don't we?
It's Sox Park.
Yeah. Blocks or Legos?
Legos, absolutely. I've got someone who's turning 3 next month, and he is Mr. Lego.
Is his birthday next month?
Yeah, absolutely.
Legos. Favorite snack?
Pizza.
Pizza and Twizzlers. Cold Twizzlers. Best meal you've ever had?
You know, I was in Gamla in Stockholm, and I ordered reindeer, and I was so not sure about this, but like it beat any steak I've ever had in my entire life.
Really?
Was like this
You
reindeer
ate
steak. It
Rudolph?
was like to die for.
Really?
It's not Rudolph. It's like the mean reindeer, you know, like the one you don't like.
The mean reindeer. How did they prepare it? Like a steak?
Yeah, like a steak and like in a lovely sauce, and it was like a 4-course meal and just delicious and magical.
Huh. All right. In Stockholm. Probably, if you had it here, you'd be like, no, that was gross.
Meh. Yeah.
What's your guilty pleasure?
Reality television, absolutely. Like, hands down.
All right. And your latest binge?
What did I just burn through? Well, I just rewatched both Mad Men and The Walking Dead.
I love Mad Men.
I know. It's like my 3rd time through.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, but I bet you see stuff that you are like, oh, and now that you've seen it, then you can refer back.
Yeah, and you go back again. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What is next for you?
So I've recently launched HK Sully Consulting. Thank you very much. Keep an eye out for the website, hksully.com, coming soon. But I am working in my pajamas for myself for the first time in my life. And
Amazing, right?
I absolutely love it. And you get to work on a lot of cool stuff with a lot of cool companies.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of product marketing, PR, social strategy.
Content.
Content, just kind of running the gamut.
I'm going to ask you to do videos.
I'm not a big transposition person.
And with that, thank you so much. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Jenny.